here for another one of our conversations around one source tax provision functionality. And on today's session, we are going to talk a little bit about the state deductibility when it comes to the federal provision, but in particular, when it has to do with non-cash tax adjustments. So I've got a little sample here. We're all familiar with the deductible state tax option on the current provision within one source tax provision, because as we know, on the federal tax provision or federal tax return, you're allowed a deduction, or let me clarify, on the federal US tax return, you're allowed a deduction for state taxes that you have accrued as part of your process. So as you can see, I've got my $2.8 million number that's coming through on my federal. Okay, so what happens when we've got non-cash tax adjustments involved? We know about the things that go into the actual return basis provision, because those we know are representative of items that will actually show up on our tax return and so should get deducted at the federal level. But what if we've had to book other adjustments throughout the year? So these are your non-cash tax adjustments. So you can see included in the $2.8 million deduction that I have is $3.2 million of an add back. So my actual return basis provision was 6.1 million. But here I had, an add back of 3.2, reducing that number to 2.8 million. So is there an option in one source tax provision to turn this off? So yes, there is. If I jump into the administration area, and I'm going to go into the system, manage configurations section, and in my reporting, if I scroll all the way down, I will see something that says exclude state non-cash tax adjustment from federal provision report. And if I just click on the wording, it will pop up a little description that actually tells you what it does. So if we are selecting yes, then it's going to exclude that from the deductible state amount on the federal tax provision report. And if we say no, then it is going to allow it to flow through. The important point to note with that is that is an all or nothing. Remember, we're at the system level, so it's also going to impact every jurisdiction that you have within the software. So once you turn it on and say you want to exclude it, none of your non-cash tax adjustments will pass through. So what you would end up seeing on this return basis provision, if I was to check that box and rerun it, would be $6.1 million instead of the 2.8 as an add back on the federal side. So as you probably have seen, I've got a couple things in here. I'm just going to shade those in red. Your return to provision. Now, typically, when you have a return to provision true up, that is one of those items that you will want to deduct on your federal tax. So what happens when you have an amalgamation of items, some of which you want to add back or get the deductibility for, and some of which you don't? So there is an opportunity to do that, not from that option that we just saw earlier on the system. What you will potentially do is create a jurisdiction. Maybe it would be a with and without. So let's say you needed it for Alabama, or maybe you needed, depending on how many jurisdictions you need, maybe you just create one generic one that will be with or without. So you'd have to choose to either leave it on or off, and depending on the option you determine, go the other way. So if you decide to turn it on, leave it on, and you want to get rid of certain items and not have those flow through to the federal, what you can do once you've created that jurisdiction is at the individual unit level is to go into that jurisdiction. Once it's been created, and take advantage of the deductibility here. So you would activate that jurisdiction, and if you do not want those adjustments to come through, you would put 0. Now, the reason we're saying special jurisdiction is that you are only going to want to put those non-cash items that should not flow through to the federal in that jurisdiction, because we do want everything else to come through. And if you turn that current deductibility to zero, then that will also impact the return basis provision line. So you will want to set this special jurisdiction up just for your non-cash items that you do not want to flow through to the Fed. And therefore, it may be possible to create just that one jurisdiction and use that across your multiple units to go to the federal. Oops. Hope this was helpful. Look forward to seeing you in another session.